Hi and welcome to Simply Ballers 2024-2025 season previews. It's that time of the year where for the next 30 days I'll be releasing a season preview for each team. In each preview there will be a quick season and off-season recap. Then following that we'll be looking at what's in store for each team. We'll be looking at some of the key questions that they have, some of the positives, some of the negatives. It will be digging deeper in some of those areas. And at the end there are some final thoughts with prediction of the standings, their floor, their ceiling, some of the playoff chances and some other fun predictions. So today we're going for the Memphis Grizzlies, and this wasn't what the season should have been for the Grizzlies. I predicted them to be around top 3 last year, and even considering what the position was for Ja Morant, I thought they were still deep enough to make some noise, to deal with the absence, to be a top team until he comes back. But then everything else went wrong for him. Steven Adams missed the entire season. That changed everything for them. They traded for Marcus Smart, who played only 20 games. Their second best player, Desmond Bane, missed half the season. Jaren Jackson Jr. led the team with 66 games. They had 33 different players suit up at least 3 times. They had 20 players play at least 15 games, 13 players play at least 30. They only had 5 players play at least 50 games. This was as injury-riddled season as you can get. Their top 3 players played 9 games together when they went 6-3. Jackson and Bane played 41 games together where they went 13-28. You just can't do anything out of that. Their whole season was just ruined with so many injuries, and it was going to be tough winning any of those games. Even with Bane and Jackson Jr., you're not going to be winning with so many G League players, so many guys that are not NBA quality players. But there were still positives. We saw Gigi Jackson had a solid season as a 19-year-old rookie. He had a great stretch to end the season as a starter in 16 games. Bane got reps as the best guy on offense, with so many more ball handling duties, and his stats remained similar when it comes to volume and efficiency, which is a good sign that he can maintain the same level of play even if he's put in a much different position. Not sure how to feel about Jackson Jr. because his drop-offs were a bit all over the place, considering what he had to do on both ends of the floor. This was again without Adams, that he had to carry the defense a lot more, as well as having an increase in touches and responsibility on offense. When it comes to their off-season, they had a quiet one where they drafted Zach Edey, and that's going to be one of the biggest questions. They retained Luke Kennard. But outside of that, they are running back, which makes a lot of sense considering they have no evidence of what this team was meant to be. They have nothing to show for trading for Smart. They have nothing to show for just what the core is when this season was just basically a wash. So what's in store for the Grizzlies? Can they bounce back seamlessly to how they were before the season? Because taking a year out like that is going to matter when it comes to just continuity, the chemistry, and how players will look next to each other. How good offensively can they be, particularly in the half court? What can we expect from Morant just coming back after basically a whole year of absence and coming back from injury? How much will Eddie be a factor, and how impactful can he be as a rim protecting big in his rookie season? Both Jackson Jr. and Bane getting put back into the ideal role, but with improvements already. Can the young players continue to develop and be impactful on a good team? Can Gigi Jackson be good on a team that wants to compete, wants to contend? Can Vince Williams Jr. do the same thing? What would a 3-guard lineup look like? Are they going to start both Morant, Smart, and Bane? Because I'm not sure how that's going to work for the size. Will they go back to be an elite defense? Because that's what will drive them as well in the last few seasons. And is this a season of just seeing what they have and what they'll need for upcoming seasons? Because right now, they haven't seen this core. They haven't seen any of this. They're not in the same positions as they were if they just carried on as normal. So right now, I think this season just will be about seeing what they have and seeing where they need to go next. So before this season, the Grizzlies were a really good team. They won 56 and 51 games in the 2 prior seasons. They were 4th and 3rd in net rating. This was already a good enough core to compete and go on deep runs. So the first question is, can they just seamlessly go back to that? Can they take this year of just whatever and go back to what they were doing before? Is this just going to be business as usual, where it's simply as getting Morant back, getting everyone healthy, and now we're somehow a top 5 team again in the West? Or is it just more complicated than that, where the loss of Steven Adams, and the whole change of the lineups will make them have to work for it again? They will have to figure things out before they can even attempt to go into the top 5, even be a playoff team. Because one big loss that we just mentioned is Steven Adams. He was so important for them, particularly on the offensive end. And with the guy that replaced him with Eddie, there's going to be a big difference. You're not going to be expecting a rookie big to give you the kind of impact that Adams was doing. So here are some of the offensive stats with Adams on and off. In 2023, they had a 120.9 offense and 114.1 without him. In 2022, it was 120.4 and 111.3 without him. They were plus 9.8 and plus 8.3 with him in the last 2 seasons, and plus 1.8 and plus 3.4 without him. So that's going to matter. They need to somehow replace Steven Adams, and the only one that they have is Eddie. I don't think Eddie's going to have that kind of impact. I don't think he's going to make them almost a plus 10 net rating team. And a lot of that is just because of rookie bigs, especially ones that do have already question marks with just how they're going to fit in. Would they be explosive? Would they get hunted? I don't think he's going to have that kind of level. Even if he has a great rookie season, even he will have to match what someone like Shea Hoiberg was doing, or someone like Victor was doing. He will need to have that kind of impact to even bring them back to the place that they were this year. That were in previous seasons with Adams. So I don't know how that is going to work right now. On one note, even with both Morant and Jackson on, without Adams in those 2 seasons, the Grizzlies were still plus 13.6 with a 118 offense. So there are signs that it shouldn't be that big of a change. It is a sign that they can still work it out. It's a sign that Jackson as the sole 5 could make it work, even if Eddie's not up to this challenge. But a lot of it comes down to just the offensive rebounding. The Grizzlies were winning the possession battle. In 2023, they were 6th in turnover percentage and 5th in offensive rebounding percentage. They were also 7th in opponent turnover percentage. So that's how they were able to push their offense upwards, considering they were 19th and 22nd in those 2 seasons in effective field goal. So they weren't getting good enough looks. They weren't getting efficient looks. They had not a great shot diet as well, considering they were almost in bottom 10 in effective field goal, but that was made easier with the offensive rebounding. I'm not sure if they can have that same effect, that same kind of impact with either just Jackson or Jackson and Eddie. With that said, one way that they can easily bounce back, especially offensively, is simply by bringing Ja Morant back. He alone can change everything. He's that kind of type of player that can transform the offense, especially with his downfield threat and everything else that he does, especially with his passing. You can see here already, those are his talent metrics per Bebo index. Just a whole bunch of A's. A+ in finishing, A+ in playmaking talent, floater, mid-range, everything was trending upwards for him. So bringing him back, bring a top 15, top 20 caliber player will easily raise their floor. They will not be struggling offensively in the same way they have now, and this should be even better because he is still a young player that is still looking to improve, and he did have basically a whole year just looking to improve. So what kind of Ja Morant will be seeing now? I think he has got kind of underrated. I was a bit low on him previously, but just looking at some of his passing and how he can get downhill so easily, that alone is going to raise so much of the offense. It also put the 2 most important players in Jackson and Bane in the right positions, in the right roles, where they're not overtaxed offensively, and that all of that combined will just make this offense bounce back easily. Because speaking of putting guys in the right role, the first one is Bane. You can see here the kind of change he had in his offense. Last year, in 2023, he was 20% with the ball in his hands. The on-ball action share was only 24%. His offensive involvement was 17%. The touches was at 72, so he was in a different role compared to what you can see he was at this year. Almost 30% with him on the ball. He was involved in 45% of the on-ball actions, 38% offensive involvement rate, scoring possession went up, total offensive load went up, touches went up by almost 10. So he was in a completely different role. Now he's going to back to what he was in 2022 and 2023. But despite that significantly different role, he still looked good. His points per 75 went from 24.2 to 25. Effective field goals from 56 to 55. True shooting went from 60 to 58. So there are a bunch of drop-offs, but there are some positives. Like his rim field goal went from 61 to 68%. His rim assisted went from 53 to 37. So we can see that he improved in some areas while having the burden of creating for himself. So there are improvements in a much tougher role. This was not an easy season for him to just go into a very, very different role where it was him being dependent on creating for himself in a pick and roll, whether it was him just creating for others, and he was still pretty good. So how much will that just carry on once Morant will go back? Is he going to be placed in that kind of role with everything else just as a bonus, or are we going to see just more of a split offense with him and Morant? Then there's also Jackson Jr. He was also in a tough position, and he didn't have the kind of season that Bane had in that role. A lot of drop-offs. His true shooting went from 61 to 55. Effective field goal went from 57 to 49. 2-point percentage was... He already had improvements last year, going up to 58, and that dropped back to 50%. His offensive estimated plus minus went from plus 1.9 to being a negative. So he didn't have that good of a season when it comes to offense. Then defensively, he was asked to do a lot more, especially without Steven Adams. He was basically the only big. His role, his life is going to get a lot better. So now we can see him again in a role that got him the Defensive Player of the Year. So just seeing all of those changes happen, I can see a case where they should just easily bounce back. A lot of them a lot of the players that were on the team just got placed in a really bad position. Now they won't be, and that alone could just turn a whole season around. But a lot of that will also just depend on what how Zach Edey will look like. He can be the X factor on his team if everything goes well for him. Jackson Jr. needs that kind of big next to him to be in the best position defensively. The team itself will be in a better position with those two bigs, with Jaren Jackson in that kind of role, where that got him the Defensive Player of the Year. So that's where Edey comes in. Can he be a serviceable big defensively in the drop? Can he be just not a reliability where he gets hunted and you just can't do anything about it? Because without him, you'd be asking a lot from Jackson. So a lot of the season does come down if Edey can be a good defensive big and also provide something on offense. I don't think that will be as big of an issue through 82 games. You can just survive those minutes if he's average. But then that will matter a lot more in the playoffs, where those kind of bigs do get hunted. They do see a drop off in the minutes. So a lot of it will just depend on his development. But with his big body and rim protection, with Williams Jr. and Jackson Jr., this could be another elite defense from the team. Then on the offensive end, it's seeing how effective the Morant-Edey pick and roll is going to be. That has the potential to be very good. It's that kind of big body and Morant's speed and athleticism, that could easily be one of the best duos just going at it. Can he also be an offensive rebounding monster at that size with that weight? His offensive rebound is going to be needed because it has been needed for the Grizzlies. Crashing the glass was important for them in these 2 seasons. So they will need that kind of impact again. But I also wonder if he's going to have a bigger role offensively. Can he have a bigger role offensively? He's a big body. He can go into the post effectively as well. So I wonder just how they'll incorporate him on both ends of the floor. There's still Marcus Smart that we need to talk about. He only played 20 games, and I forgot he's on the team. I don't really see what the move was for him last year. Not sure how that will work with Morant, Bane, and Smart together. Is that the vision? Is he coming off the bench? Because he's not exactly a perfect fit offensively, especially with someone like Ja, where he's also not a shooter. Jackson is not a reliable spacing option either. Eddie won't be. So I wonder how that is all going to work. Is Bane going to be the only plus shooter on the team with the starting lineups? So they still have a bunch of rotation questions. Then there are a bunch of young players and role players that could have an impact, but will they? Jackson and Williams Jr. had solid stretches and showed flashes, but they're going to be in a very different role with different expectations. So can the kind of game that they showed, can that continue with this team? Can they have that kind of impact with different kind of freedom, different kind of responsibilities, with different expectations? So that's what the season is going to be. It's seeing just what they have with the young players. It's seeing how much Eddie can improve, develop, how he will look in his rookie season. It's seeing how the Morant-Bane duo will work again with the Bane's improvements. It's also seeing just how Smart fits in all of this. So this season it looks like a bit more of an experiment and just seeing what they have as a group. So some predictions, I have them as a 44 to 48 win team. Their floor is a playing team with a lot of questions left to answer, but their ceiling could be a top 3 team if those questions get answered. They'll definitely be better. They won't be a sub 30 team, but I also don't see them as a team that they were 2 seasons ago. I don't see them as a easily a 50 win team, though I would have them comfortably in the top 6. I'd be quite surprised if they're in a play-in, but at the same time I don't think they have the things to be a top 3 team. I don't think their offense will be as good, and there could be a potential defensive drop-off if Eddie doesn't work out, and that's where my question marks come in, because a lot of their success feels like it will come down to him being good enough to warrant those high minutes, and it's going to be banking a lot on Jackson Jr. if he's not. Can Jackson Jr. just be effectively through 82 games as the big if the Eddie experiment doesn't work out? While their core is still a good core, they still have so many pieces that they brought back together, and they were a 50 win team. So there is still signs and potential from just how it worked in the past. There's still a potential for that Morant will be an All-NBA guy. There's still potential with Bane having a career year. Kid could make an all-star team. He already showed what he is as the best offensive guard on the team without Morant for this year. So how will that look alongside him? Overall, they will just be right in a mix, competing in the regular season on both ends. I'm not that high on them in the playoffs because they already had questions without all of this considered last year. Though I think this year's season will just be seeing what they have and what moves they need to make to be a contender for next year.